Step back in the center. So, okay, we've talked about other aspects of MITRE ATT&CK as a framework, different perspectives on what ATT&CK does. We're going to talk about cyber threat intelligence elements for a little bit. We're not going to take too long. And I'm going to try to leave a fairly decent amount of time for questions, or I will just ad-lib and you will have to deal with that. So we will see what happens as part of this process. So in looking at ATT&CK as a project, certainly we're all very familiar with ATT&CK as being a set of techniques, sub-techniques organized by tactics that represent how adversaries go about operations, the behavioral aspect of how adversaries pursue their objectives. The cyber threat intelligence element of ATT&CK as a framework is meant to identify the who and the what behind those techniques in terms of what is actually implementing these items or how are they captured in terms of in the wild activity. As a result, ATT&CK CTI portion is designed to capture the relevant threat landscape in a timely fashion. And I say timely because, we try our best. We have a release cycle that is twice a year, and as anyone who follows the threat landscape is aware, it changes pretty fast. So we do a best effort job to try to make sure that we are as aligned as possible, and we always work hard to try to make sure that we're doing as best as we can so that the most important items are reflected in the framework. Having said that, though, we do have some areas where we are falling a little short, in my opinion, after joining the team in January of this year. Namely, in capturing additional geographies, so kind of breaking out of our North America focus, as well as especially capturing a lot of the activity we see in the e-crime sector. ATT&CK CTI has been very advanced persistent threat or state-sponsored in nature, at least in terms of focus. And part of this is due to difficulty in how these actors work, but we're really striving to become more aligned with what industry is seeing, what a lot of our customers have to deal with on a day-to-day, well, not customers, but stakeholders have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Finally, in terms of a goal that I've set for the team that aligns with something that's been presented previously by predecessors in this role, is that we want to try to leverage an overlooked object within the CTI framework of campaigns for more accurate representation of how activity changes over time. So what does this look like? So ATT&CK CTI objects consist of three fundamental items. We have groups, so who these actors are or what these actors are. Who is a difficult question. It gets into interesting attribution questions as we typically are associating groups based upon clusters of behaviors. So think more diamond model and less forensic analysis and pointing out like this guy is the one responsible. Although when we can find that, we do. It's just not as common. But then those groups employ software in order to achieve their objectives and to satisfy techniques as part of their behavioral life cycle. And so capturing things not just in terms of malware objects, but also tools like think rclone or remote management and maintenance software, which has already been mentioned at this event, that are used to facilitate adversary objectives. And finally, groups employ software in iterations or in discrete actions against victims that we look at as campaigns. So trying to capture a snapshot in time of what this group looked like during this sequence of events, operate against a set of victims from time A to time B, leveraging these tools. So ultimately putting all this together in such a fashion that we arrive at a way that these objects link together to define what we're looking for from a cyber threat intelligence perspective. Now, when it comes to priorities, so certainly on the APT or state-sponsored front, we want to continue capturing new and emerging state-directed threats. So the timing on this one was a little unfortunate. We have a release coming up next week. What have we been seeing in the news the last couple of weeks? Typhoon this, typhoon that, et cetera. So sometimes it just doesn't align very well, but we want to make sure that we're trying to capture as many of these things as possible to make sure that ATT&CK is the gold standard reference, not just in terms of who's who in the zoo, but also the references that allow researchers to link back from a given threat actor to understand and to make the links for their own research and analysis of where this information came from. So we're still going to be doing APTs and similar or whatever. We're not losing sight of that objective. We're just going to work harder and add crimeware or crimeware groups to the mix as well. You'll see some of this in the last ATT&CK release, and we're trying to amp this up as we move along, capturing things like e-crime groups where possible. It's difficult because we look at the ransomware as a service and various software ecosystems make this challenging, but really trying to work to disambiguate between groups, software, and campaigns. Which is why you might see overlaps between groups that also are associated with a specific software, but that software may also be deployed by other entities. In terms of software, we certainly want to still keep our focus on malware, ensure important unique malware is captured in ATT&CK, and expand our coverage of stealers and intermediate tools. But the sheer volume of stuff that's out there means we're never going to have everything. So there have to be hard decisions that we make in order to see what we capture and what's most relevant. As part of that, ransomware becomes an interesting thing because we want to improve our coverage of ransomware families, but honestly, ransomware is really boring. They all do the same thing. They encrypt files, access processes, and whatnot. There's not a whole lot of sort of scientific or research value to capturing each and every individual ransomware variant that's out there, but there is significant value for organizations that are leveraging the software repository for mapping and reference purposes, so we're going to try. Finally, there are those tools and utilities that are used in intrusions, such as RMM tools. It's a very tricky area because there's so many of them, and adversaries have leveraged quite a few. So we'll never cover them all, but we're going to try to cover the most important ones to make sure that attack is covering the, looking to an 80-20 rule of capturing the 20% of the tool sets that are out there that are responsible for 80% or more of the activity. Finally, for campaigns, in my opinion, remain underutilized. We have fewer than 40 campaign objects by my last count, or at least before the next release, that exist within attack, where we should have hundreds potentially. And this will be changing, including modifying community submissions into campaign topics where it seems more aligned. The reason for this is that I've gotten feedback and going out into industry from folks that look at things like, hey, APT28. I look at what APT28 does, and it's the entire attack matrix. How do I emulate this? Well, the problem is that for entities that have been along for a long time, like APT28, Sandworm, APT5, et cetera, they've evolved over time, and continuing to capture that as part of one record really distorts our view of what we're tracking. So we're going to try to do a better job of capturing what entities look like in certain intrusion campaigns so that users of the attack framework for adversary emulation and similar purposes can determine what these entities look like at the most recent point in time or in certain operations against specific sectors and similar considerations. Finally, there's murky relationships among multiple actors in e-crime that make campaign representation often more applicable than explicit groups. It just becomes hard when all you have is a given info stealer or ransomware variant that's being used. So with that, I've got a very short period of time for questions because we had a little bit of we had a relaxing break. So
the only question we got in the Slack was who was going to ask Joe questions. And so now you have the answer to that. And so in the room, does anyone have questions for Joe in the back?
And you plan on utilizing that as a basis because it's very kind of expensive.
Yes.
So do you plan on using the RMM project in your work?
It will certainly use to supplement it. I'm not going to turn away free work that other folks are doing. It's just the problem is there's so many tools that are out there, and looking at the long tail of RMM software, we just don't have the cycles to capture everything. So we're going to do the best that we can. We're going to capture the big fish that are in the pond, but a lot of the smaller fish, unless there's a compelling reason because it does something unique or interesting, we just can't get to all of them because there's so many now and there's always new ones that are popping up over time. So leverage the resources that are out there, and I love the community for pointing these things out, but we can't boil the ocean, so to speak.
I think we had a couple other from that corner before, or in the front.
Not just non-malicious tools, but also legitimate cloud services. So that would be a great way to understand what legitimate cloud services are being used by different actors, by different developers.
I'm not sure there's a question there, though. Is there a plan for legitimate cloud services being in their mix?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for legitimate cloud services being abused, it's definitely something that I want to capture because I agree with you that we see these things like, pick a vendor. I don't know if I can name one individually, but there's only like 3 big ones. Well, more than that. But anyway, you get what I mean. That how these entities are manipulating these services or using them for malicious means, it's really a tension within attack as a framework overall, because if you look at what used to be pre-attack and now is sort of the infrastructure area of attack in terms of acquiring or compromising infrastructure, that from a behavior standpoint, it's really hard to capture these in terms of an action. So, might there be other options in order to capture this? Potentially, and certainly we want to be aware of it, but I don't have a firm answer at this time.
And with that, thank you very much, Joe, and we're at time.